Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the latest in our series of USAID, USEA Cybersecurity and Digitalization industry panels. Our session today is on energy sector cyber threats, intrusion detecting, and testing. We have a stellar group of speakers that we're honored to have with us today. Just a little bit about USEA and my role in it. I'm the acting executive director of the United States Energy Association, previously and now reformed from my legal life, in which I've done a lot of investigation of cyber threats and security issues vis-a-vis the grid. And I serve on the American Bar Association's Cybersecurity Task Force. About the USEA. A little bit further, we're a nonprofit, non-lobbying organization, entirely nonpartisan, and we were founded back in 1935. We have two pillars in our mission here. One is we convene, educate, and serve as a resource for the energy industry vis-a-vis what we're doing right here and now. And we convene, and we do these convenings normally in person, but of course, everything has gone virtual for the past several months. We also provide support for and work very, very closely with the USAID, the Department of State, and the Department of Energy throughout the world to better the lives of people throughout the world by working with them to provide them with affordable, clean, and reliable energy access. To give a little context for today's program, USAID and USEA launched a 15-part cybersecurity and digitalization webinar series in June 20 to educate utilities on cyber standards, trends, and best practices. The webinar series and panels will be the foundation for the Business Innovation Partnership that will convene a global network of utility thought leaders to assist USAID partner utilities to navigate the most pressing challenges today within that rapidly changing industry and the cybersecurity aspects of it. Our industry has undergone rapid digitalization, presenting attackers with new attack surfaces to exploit. The emergence of smart grids, smart devices have made the sector an even more attractive target. And because of this extremely rapid change, cybersecurity is absolutely critical to protect the assets related to the delivery and provision of service in energy, and to continue to assure reliability. Many of you know that the grids throughout the world undergo hundreds of thousands of attempted cyber incursions every minute of every day. One of my mottos is energy never sleeps, and neither do the cybersecurity attacks and the need to evolve and be educated on cybersecurity. And thus, we now turn to our conference. We have brilliant, outstanding leaders in the field of cybersecurity, and it's an honor to have them on the program with us today. Kristen, it's you take it from here, and then I will come back on.
Great. Thank you so much, Sheila. We're honored to have Sheila Hallis, the Acting Executive Director of USEA, hosting our industry panel today. My name is Kristen Madler. I'm a Senior Energy Advisor with USAID's Global Energy and Infrastructure Office, and I manage the Global Innovation Partnership Initiative implemented in collaboration with USEA's Energy Utility Partnership Program, where 5 utilities from around the globe will be invited to partner with advanced utilities to collaborate on change management and business process innovation. Utilities accepted into the program will receive support from experienced facilitators, coaches, and utility mentors to develop a comprehensive action plan detailing how a pilot project could tackle a specific cyber, digital, or energy management system challenge within their organization. And as Sheila mentioned, we just completed our 15-part webinar series on cybersecurity and digitalization, which reached more than 4,200 participants from 70 utilities in 68 different countries. And you can find links to those recordings and presentations at usea.org if you missed any of the modules in that series. And so in response to requests from the webinar attendees and recognizing in the current environment, it's quite challenging to meet with cybersecurity firms to learn about their products and services, We are bringing top US cybersecurity experts to you from the comfort of your own home, together with our expert industry moderator, Andy Bachman. So on behalf of USAID, I would like to thank our moderator and each of today's panelists for sharing your expertise and insights with us today, and also for presenting in that webinar series. So without further delay, I will pass the floor to you, Sheila, and thank you again for hosting today's panel.
It's an honor, Kristen, and thank you for your very useful insights. Kristen, I'd like to introduce Andy Bachman. Andy is a senior grid strategist for Idaho National Laboratories, National and Homeland Security Directorate. In that role, he provides strategic guidance on topics at the intersection of grid security and resilience to NH&S leadership, as well as senior U.S. and international government and industry leaders. So we are delighted to have Andy with his wisdom and intense insights and experience join us this morning. Andy, take it away.
Thanks, Sheila. Thanks, Kristen, and everybody who's helped put this thing together and prepare for it. We're very excited to be speaking to you, large global audience all over the place with various levels of experience and expertise and various challenges too in the grid security space. A couple comments and then we'll launch right in. First thing is, I've coached the panelists, all of whom can go into fairly tremendous technical depth when needed. I've coached them to speak at a more of a generalist level because we don't want to leave anyone out of the conversation. And there'll be a couple panelists that will speak in a more advanced way. But what I would say is, if you find that you have a pressing question that we're not going to get to today, perhaps one that is of a more technical nature, then please, the USAID and USEA folks welcome your questions via email or however you can get them to us, and we'll be sure to get you the response that you seek. Okay, so don't forget to think about asking questions during today if we can get to them, but also asking questions afterwards if you can. The structure of this presentation is going to be, as you can see, there's 5 panelists and me, and I'm going to do brief intros, and then each panelist will talk for a few minutes, like 2 or 3 minutes, some or all accompanied by slides. Then I'm going to ask them a question of that panelist, and then we'll move through the group of 5. If we can do that with some speed, we'll have some room at the end for both some interactive Q&A as well as to potentially respond to questions in the chat section of the Zoom call. Okay, so that's what we're gonna try to do. So the topic is we're going to basically talk about the basics of what the title says, right? Threats, intrusion detecting and testing in the energy sector, and in this case, we mainly mean the electric sector. Although some electric sectors, like in the US, increasingly rely on natural gas as part of their generation portfolio. But it's mainly from an electrical point of view that we're coming at you. Some of the best practices of some organizations that have a level of maturity that you could potentially learn from, whether they're in generation, transmission, distribution, or in some countries and in some places, all 3 of those things, right? Some are government owned and some government run and not as commercial. There's various things to think about there. A lot of the things we'll talk about are internal functions, but we also have an expert or 2 on communicating with the government and other types of stakeholders, how to try to speak their language and hit topics and use persuasive techniques that help move them in a path towards supporting more security initiatives, perhaps investing a little bit more money in the grid security of that utility and or of that country, okay? So now I'm going to do a rapid fire intros, just so you know these people that you're seeing on the slide a little bit, can relate to them a little bit, and then we'll kick off with Drew. All right, so but I'm going to do the intros all in one quick batch, okay? Drew Begley, and you can follow around on the slide that you're seeing here. He's VP and Counsel for Privacy and Cyber Stuff at CrowdStrike, okay? And he also has a significant international pedigree in that he served on Europol Advisory Group and ICANN, so he's definitely a person of the world and I believe you'll find him interesting for sure. The second person that'll be speaking is Coleman Metta. He's a senior director of U.S. policy, think policy, right, at Palo Alto Networks. And one thing I'd like you to know about him is he's been steeped in government, both with our National Security Council, Department of Homeland Security. So if anybody on this group, in addition to Drew, is used to speaking to government types, people who are not experts but are generalists, it's going to be Coleman. So tune in for him if that's something that you need. And remember, don't forget about the follow-up questions. Third up will be Dr. Michael Milrea. He is Director of OT Security Research and Development at General Electric, and has a bunch of patents. And I think his perspective now, he's been in different places for sure, but he's at actual equipment supplier company. So that perspective, dealing with the asset owners, and I think it's going to be really helpful. Contrast to some of the other speakers. Otis Alexander, my friend at MITRE, which is a federally funded research and development corporation. He has an interesting background besides being brilliant, and he'll tell you what he's worked on. But he's from Washington State. This is how we confuse the rest of the world. He's from Washington State in the far northwest of the country, but he lives and works in Washington, D.C., which is in the far east coast of the country. And so a little geography lesson for those folks who don't know. Probably half the people in the United States aren't even fully aware of that yet. We don't excel at geography, as I've noticed. And the last speaker in the order will be Tim Watkins. He does a lot of heavy-duty security lifting at Schweitzer Electric Labs. And I just want to point out that, sort of like with Michael from GE, Schweitzer plays a super integral role in the functioning of the grid and the protection of the grid. Some of their equipment is absolutely the most essential stuff to achieve a high level of confidence in grid protection. And he's going to be talking about some security topics, obviously. All right, so thanks for enduring that. Hopefully you found that semi-helpful. And now we're going to go to Drew. Drew Begley, again, I'll remind you, he's a VP and counsel, this means lawyer, and he covers privacy and cyber at CrowdStrike, which is a pretty amazing cybersecurity firm. So Drew, without further ado, please take it away.
Thank you. And there's a lot of pressure on me being first not to delay the entire program. So I will try to keep
That's so true.
Hello, everyone. I wish I could be with you in person, but thank you so much for tuning in. What I would like to talk about today on the panel is I'd really like to emphasize the endpoint security aspect of OT security. And so at CrowdStrike, we are on a mission to stop breaches, and our software offerings really focus on endpoint security and this notion that these days just about anything can be an endpoint. Next slide, please. Andy already spoke a bit about my background, so I won't dwell on this too much, but just wanted to note that like many of the panelists here, I also had a previous life in government before moving to the private sector with CrowdStrike. And I've been at CrowdStrike for about 6 years, but still have been able to sit on advisory boards, which allow me to interact with the government and understand that perspective and understand the difficulty sometimes in deploying new technologies when you're trying to navigate older regulations. And I think that's no different in the energy sector. Next slide, please. But the thing is that everyone should keep in mind, whether you're working for a power utility or you're working somewhere else in the energy space and dealing with grids, is to remember, as Shayla brought up in her remarks, that these days there are so many IoT devices being deployed. And what that means is just about any sensor that you're putting onto your grid these days could be an attack vector and could be some sort of endpoint. And so that's why it's important to even think about the computers that you're using that might be replacing older terminals. And so while that might be fantastic for modernization, it also means that it comes with responsibilities for security. And so that's where, when you think about it, as a power utility, you're responsible for a lot of data. You're obviously responsible for the security of the grid itself and all of the data that could be used by adversaries to really inflict damage on the grid. but there's even data that you're responsible for, such as your customer data or your own employee data. And that's why it's important to think about this problem holistically and how to protect your organization as a whole, and think about that entire ecosystem and even the supply chain that you're dependent upon for your security. And so as you onboard new technologies and new IoT devices, it's important to think about whether or not you're going to be able to secure them and what your security strategy is. And that's why for anyone on the Zoom today that is in a position to think about even the regulatory environment and what regulations are best, it's important to think about the fact that adversaries are going to continue to innovate no matter what. And so that's why any sorts of certification regimes should be built with innovation in mind. So when there are security certifications for devices, it's important to remember that at the end of the day, security methods and the latest security methods need to be able to secure those devices. So it's important not to block those out with certification regimes. Next slide, please. And at CrowdStrike, we offer a single lightweight endpoint that our customers install on their devices that communicates with our cloud infrastructure. And through that, we're able to offer several different solutions in the security space to stop breaches. But if you look at the center of the grid, just for endpoint security alone, that's where there's a lot of different methodologies that need to be deployed. So of course, in the years ago, the older method was determining whether or not a file was bad or not with traditional antivirus software. But these days, that's not how threats actually work. And particularly when you're talking about the types of sophisticated adversaries that would be targeting power utilities. And that's where it's important to do everything from understanding indicators of attack rather than just indicators of compromise, to actually thinking about what's being connected even by USB to computers that might be part of your grid. And so that's why, for our offerings, we really get into that holistically and try to help you protect your organization as a whole. And so for more information, feel free to reach out to me. Next slide, please. Put an email address on the next slide. And I think hopefully I've, gotten out of this in 3 minutes, so Andy's not mad at me.
Time is relative, Drew, and depends which clock we're using. But thank you. That was pretty brief. I'm going to hold off on questions because I want to make sure everybody gets to do their 3 to 4 minutes of fame. I do have a quick comment about because you come from the privacy and data world. And this is just a comment, okay, for the audience, and that is, in addition to making sure you protect your own data that are essential for your employees and your functionality of your OT equipment, make sure there's not too much sensitive information around on the internet that could be used for open source intel type of making the attackers' jobs easier. A lot of people don't pay any attention to that. And it's very easy to learn a lot about what types of equipment you're running, who your suppliers are, who your maintainers are, because a lot of that's posted online without people knowing about it. If you look for it, you'll find it. You can maybe take steps to limit that easy vector for folks. Okay, up next is, thanks Drew, and up next is Coleman Metta, as I said, Senior Director of Policy for Palo Alto Networks. And Coleman, the clock is started, go, good luck.
Great, well, thank you, Andy, and thank you USAID and USEA as well for hosting this forum today. Coleman Metta, Palo Alto Networks. So Palo Alto Networks, one of the world's largest cybersecurity companies, almost 75,000 enterprise customers, which translates to protecting about a billion customers around the world on everything from endpoints to traditional network security to the cloud. And apart from being one of the largest cybersecurity companies, we're also consistently named one of the most innovative cybersecurity companies as well. So I'm happy to provide a lot more detail. Anybody has questions about Palo Alto Networks and what we do. But I thought I would actually take a step back and use my time a little bit to talk about the cybersecurity industry as a whole, and in one way, sort of how it's different from the broader technology industry. So the broader technology industry, you think about having a smartphone and all the technology that goes along with that, how seamless it is, how it's user-based and user-centric. So for instance, if you wanted to hire a taxi, get an Uber or a Lyft, you click on your smartphone, you press a button, and all in the background, you have a mapping function, and you have a dispatch function, and you have a payment function, all working together seamlessly to get you where you want to go. And the cybersecurity industry hasn't always been built that way. It's almost been every single piece of cyber is its own industry. You have an entire industry built just around firewalls, and another entire industry built just around endpoints, and maybe other industries built just around cloud and cloud security. And our view at Palo Alto Networks is that the way to do cybersecurity the best is to make sure that instead of having those siloed different industries, that you can do it comprehensively. And that's the only way really, because that gives you complete visibility and complete integration and allows you to do your cybersecurity capabilities across all of your different network infrastructure. And I think that's kind of analogous to where we are in terms of threat detection as well. Typically when organizations think about threat detection and building a security operations center, a SOC, their first move might be to hire a lot of tools and capabilities, because the more tools you get, the more ground you might cover, the more alerts you get. But that isn't always the best and most efficient approach. All of a sudden, your analysts are drowning in alerts, thousands and thousands that come in each day, and they're much more reactive than perhaps they should be. So for instance, at Palo Alto Networks, we have our entire security operations center operates with a lean staff of about a dozen people or so, working more or less under normal business hours. And the way we're able to do that is with our product suite that we call Cortex, Palo Alto Networks Cortex. So the idea would be that instead of taking all your logging data from endpoints and all your logging data from the cloud and all from elsewhere, and having the analyst try and sift through that and determine which of them are connected and how they fit together, we can use automation and use machine learning to do that, and to do that at scale, such that all of the alerts that are coming in are triaged together, and then using a security orchestration and an automation tool to bring those together and have your machine learning and have your technologies cut out all of the different alerts that are benign or that might be able to be low fidelity in some ways. And then you can turn your analysts to the threat hunting and to focusing on the most serious pieces of that. So that's where we're using both machine learning and using automation to try and move the ball forward, and to do so in a comprehensive fashion that covers your entire network infrastructure. So again, I think I'm coming close to my time, so I'm happy to provide more details and more questions about it, but let me stop there and turn it back to Andy. So thank you all.
Okay, thanks, Coleman. And one thing I wanted to note up front, Coleman used, even though we know we're speaking to people with different levels of experience and also utilities with widely varying level of resources, including some of you probably feel like you have almost nothing to work with. I have a question on that later on, but just be aware that all the panelists are prepared. We'll see if we get to it in the time, if I'll just shut up, but all prepared to respond to questions and requests for help potentially, no matter what your starting point is. You don't have to be a super gigantic utility with lots of resources to be able to take advantage of some of these capabilities and good use from them, okay? Thanks, Coleman. Dr. Michael Milray, you are up, and your clock is gonna start, and you know what I'll do if you go too long, so good luck. Michael Milray, Director of Security, OT, Operational Technology at General Electric, a supplier.
Great, thank you, Andy. It's a pleasure. A special thanks to USA, USEA, and thank you for your fearlessly moderating this panel. 15 years ago, Andy and I were looking at the trend lines in Cambridge. At the time, I was working on energy cybersecurity issues at a small think tank, and we looked at the trend and we said, the entire energy value chain, or generation or transmission and distribution, is increasingly digitized and automated, connected to the internet. It's weaving together IT and OT, cyber and physical systems, smart and legacy systems. And there's a true business driver and opportunity there. It's unlocking incredible value, improving efficiency, reliability, safety. It's enabled us to tie in distributed energy resources and better balance and monitor the grid. At the same time, and why we're here, it's also significantly expanded the attack surface. We're seeing a cyber threat and adversary that's complex, non-linear, rapidly evolving. We're seeing tactics, techniques, procedures, the warning call that, what the the fear that Andy and I had during that conversation, that it was only a matter of time before one of these adversaries exploited that attack surface, these vulnerabilities, to cause an actual kinetic blackout, an attack that crosses from cyber into physical. And we unfortunately are increasingly seeing these type of attacks, these TTP. And so if this is the problem, let me tell you shortly what we're doing about it. Next slide. So we're taking a very different approach. We're saying with this attack surface, adversary are eventually going to find a way to get in, either through software, hardware, the supply chain, insider attack. And there's also human error and computation error. And there's also hazards related to naturally occurring events. And so our goal with a program called Digital Ghost, which I help lead at GE, is how do we move the industry from cybersecurity to cyber resilience? And in order to do that, and do that in a cost-effective way, we had to move towards cyber optimization, and that we had to find opportunities not only to identify, detect, protect, respond, and recover these sophisticated cyber attacks, but also faults, naturally occurring faults. Find ways to improve the monitoring, visibility, control of these high-value energy delivery systems. And so getting this right, as a producer of a third of the world's power systems, getting this right is important. So in short, what we've developed is a high-fidelity, living, breathing digital twin of these critical assets. And with that, we're able to understand what normal looks like, and we're able to detect and localize these very, very sophisticated attacks to these critical systems in a unique way. So that's leveraging deep domain expertise and knowledge of what normal looks like of the asset, of the energy delivery system, the ability to understand when that anomaly is caused by either a fault or a sophisticated attack. And then what we've recently demonstrated, and what we've been told is very potentially a world's first, is we've demonstrated a self-healing neutralization capability. So not only the ability to detect those zero-day exploits at the asset level, but to neutralize those attacks in real time to keep the asset running well under attack. And so for all the technical accomplishments, we're still working closely with DARPA, with Department of Energy, with our energy utility partners to figure out some of the people challenges. How do we explain how that AI and machine learning algorithm is operating in a way that a grid cyber defender can understand? And so that's our unique approach to this problem set. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you, Michael. Again, you can tell, audience members, you can tell that the panelists are working really hard to take just some incredibly rich information that, if they had more time and you had more time, could really get some great concepts through to you. But we're forcing it because of time constraints. And again, don't forget the chance. I see some good questions coming in the sidebar, and I think we will pledge that we'll respond to those questions. If we don't get to them during the course of this hour, we will still commit to responding to them in a way that gets you what you're looking for. Okay, our penultimate panelist is Otis Alexander from MITRE, organization similar to my own as part of the National Lab Complex. MITRE serves the interests of government, but provides a lot of benefits to end user and infrastructure operators and defenders too. And Otis is one of the best people on security topics at MITRE. So sit back, and Otis, please take it away. Good luck. The clock is starting.
All right. You're too kind, Andy. Thank you. And thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be talking about MITRE ATT&CK. It's become very popular across the world as a resource for understanding adversary behavior. And it really forms a foundation for what we call threat-informed defense, which is the systematic application of a deep understanding of adversary tradecraft and technology to prevent, detect, and or respond to cyber attacks. So that's what I'll be talking about today. There's many technology domains that are covered by ATT&CK. I'll be focusing on ICS because that's the most relevant one here. If you'd like to look at Attack for ICS, the website is right there, so feel free to visit it. Next slide. So what is Attack? Can you build on that? It's a knowledge base of adversary behavior. So notice I didn't say it's a knowledge base of IOCs or IPs or hashes or anything like that. It's a knowledge base of adversary behavior, and I'll explain what that means a little bit. So build on it one more time. So it's based on real world observations. So this isn't just everything a particular attacker could do to a system. It's what they've really done out in the wild, what we view as credible. Build again. So it's free, open, and globally accessible. So you don't have to spend any money for this. You can access it from anywhere in the world, and you can really leverage this resource in your environment. It's also a common language. I think this is really important for a lot of people. It allows you to speak between organizations. It allows you to speak to integrators, to device vendors, to security vendors, to state really what adversaries are doing on the network. Next. And it's community driven. So it's not something that MITRE is building on its own in a silo. We look for contributions from the community, and we welcome them, and we will put you on there as a contributor if you give us some information that we can use. Next slide. So really quick, just so you get a visual of what you would be getting with Attack, this is the most common view. It's the technique matrix. If you build one. Across the top, what you have are tactics, and these are the adversary's technical goals. So this could be anything from gaining initial access to laterally moving to, doing some of the things that are no kidding dangerous in these systems, impairing process control and creating impacts. If you build one more time, and the techniques are associated with the tactics, and they talk about how the adversary accomplishes that goal, specifically how they achieve it. One more build. And then within each technique, you get a number of resources. You get a description of the actual technique. You get data sources that you can collect to detect that technique. You get mitigations associated with stopping that technique. And you also get detailed information of how each of the adversaries use this technique specifically. So this is called the procedure. So altogether, this represents behavior of adversaries in this realm, and it's the tactics, techniques, and procedures that we're collecting. So I'll leave it there.
That's great. That's great. Thank you, Principal Cybersecurity Engineer at MITRE. And engineer is an important part of the term here. One thing we won't get to, but I'll say it now, is probably as Otis mentioned, there's no charge to be able to take advantage of this resource. And I would seriously urge you to consider participating, as he invited you, participating in the MITRE Attack program, contributing to it. There's no end of good education for you and contributions you might make to the larger community by participating in this. Some things that we're talking about today do cost money, but this is a great example of a tremendous resource that is being offered up for the community. So think about that, and we're happy to, I'm sure Otis and others will be happy to answer more questions about how to get best use and get started with Attack. Okay, our last in this lightning round of mini presentations, stressful mini presentations, last but not least in the advanced category is Tim Watkins. He leads product sales for OT, operational technology. Again, we define our acronyms in international audiences and with generalists too, for software-defined networks. This is an advanced topic, and Tim is going to try to take 3 minutes or so to explain what it is and what they're doing with it that could help you and others. Go, Tim, go.
Hey, thanks, Andy and everyone, especially USEA for inviting me. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So around 2010, SEL began looking for a better way to do Ethernet in energy control systems. Traditional Ethernet could not promise the jitter or latency requirements needed for protection or automation traffic when using a traditional switch. We began focusing our efforts on Ethernet interoperability, performance, and security. and we ended up developing operational technology software-defined networking based on the open standard OpenFlow 1.3. Unlike IT-based SDN, OT-SDN is static. Once a switch is programmed, it is no longer needed in communication with the flow controller, and the switch will retain its flows even if that switch is power cycled. The performance of OT-SDN comes from the network having a traffic engineered remedial action scheme or a pre-planned response to conditions to automatically take corrective actions. If a link breaks or a switch fails, we have designed and tested failover paths that begin to be used in 100 microseconds. Considering that typical rapid spanning tree algorithms take about 10 to 100 milliseconds, OT-SDN has the ability to fail over 100 times faster than traditional networks. And this becomes very important when we begin using Ethernet-based protection traffic. The cybersecurity strength comes from the fact that you have to create communication flows between devices that start in a deny by default setting. Think of it building a virtual circuit between two endpoint devices. If you're a computer and I'm a web server, we can make a flow between us using the physical port, the network address, the Ethernet protocol, and you be coming to me on a destination port of 443 for, say, HTTPS traffic. Once that flow is made, the only thing that you can communicate to me on is HTTPS until other flows are made. I can also make a mirror or copy of that flow and send it to intrusion detection systems for further analysis to have better context of what that traffic is doing. Next slide. Once the flow controller programs the OT-SDN switches, we can lock communication down between devices in what I like to call a stateless firewall that is in full agreement with your network diagram and data flow diagrams. Those are two very important documents needed to baseline your system to either understand how to troubleshoot it or to understand what's going on from a cybersecurity perspective. We are also not limited by which paths we use. In this example, I have primary protection traffic using the shortest path through the middle switch and secondary protection traffic going through the top switch. I don't ever want my automation traffic to be competing with this, so I have that going through the bottom switch. And I leave engineering access as a dotted line to delineate that I do not need to leave these human to machine flows on all the time because they're not used too often, even only a couple times a year. Go ahead and click. If a device plugs into a port with no flows, the very first hello message from this device can either be dropped or it can be sent to the intrusion detection system with a VLAN tag of 666 saying, this is not supposed to be here. And go ahead and click again. Additionally, to the raw PCAP, the intrusion detection system will also get a syslog message from the switch and the flow controller about a new device being plugged in that most likely was not authorized or approved by the Change Management Control Board. And click again. If an engineering access system begins to show enumeration scanning or worm-like activity, we can also VLAN that traffic with 666 and also color that with another packet so you know exactly what switch and what port that bad traffic was discovered on, which adds another set of evidence to be understood by the intrusion detection system. OT-SDN controllers give additional information such as the number of packets sent, the size of those packets, and I believe that all of this above can be used by intrusion detection systems to have further context into the Ethernet devices existing on the system and who should be communicating with what and over what protocol. And with that, I'll stop there and we can move forward, but that's my gist of it. If you want to find more about this technology or other things that Schweitzer Engineering Laboratories does, please contact me. Thank you.
That's great. Some of you have the right background to fully understand and appreciate what Tim said. I think he did a masterful job at making something fairly complex understandable. If you're right on the edge of understanding and it sounds like it could be helpful, then by all means take up his offer to get back in touch. But this is in some ways some cutting edge technology. If you have the good fortune to have the resources to investigate it, that's probably a worthwhile endeavor. Okay, so now we're into, I think I called those the lightning presentations. I don't know what's faster than lightning, but I think we're about to find out because I'm going to ask you to respond in about a minute as opposed to 3 minutes. and it'll be harsher. When the minute's over, it's over. So you'll see it's going to be a little more abrupt. So because I want to get to some of the audience questions too. We have some good sidebar ones. So anyway, go back in the same order so that you're not thrown off. Drew, this is back to Drew Begley of CrowdStrike. Again, you pointed out that these days, 2020, pandemic, it's probably not related to either of those details. Anything, almost anything could be considered an endpoint. Can you give a couple examples of things people might not consider an endpoint that needs protecting or that could cause trouble? And anything else you'd like to elaborate on in what remains of that minute on indicators of attack and compromise? Good luck.
Sure, thank you. Challenge accepted for 1 minute. So in the utility space, just about any sensor deployed these days, anything that connects either to the internet or to your network or to one of your other devices that connects to your network or the internet can be an endpoint. And so these days, adversaries will find a beachhead and attack the device that they can get into and then move laterally throughout a network to achieve their main objective. Or, as you alluded to, Andy, after my initial comments, sometimes they're leveraging other information, such as credentials they've harvested elsewhere to do what we call CrowdStrike big game hunting and achieve some bigger objective. And so as displayed on the attack framework, really adversaries are using a variety of methods. And so that's why anything can be an endpoint, and it's important to look at adversary behavior. And so CrowdStrike's Falcon platform is actually mapped to the attack framework, and we're looking for those indicators of attack. And then our machine learning technology is detecting those and stopping them. And then we're also deploying threat hunting techniques where we have our own team looking out for methods that might not otherwise be detectable because they may have never been seen before, for that very reason that anything could be an endpoint.
Drew, thank you. That was very much like a minute without exactly being a minute. It shows that you're not an overly rigid person. That type of flexibility can be very valuable. Coleman, you're up. We're going to turn to you, even though Drew can probably do it too. We're going to turn to you to be the master interpreter and psychologist of government people. How you can communicate. Imagine communicating any of the content that we've hit so far to high level or mid level or even regional type government people. What techniques in about a minute? Coleman, what techniques would you start with recommending to folks? Because some people want to know that.
Sure, thanks, Andy. That's a great question. So my sense of this is, in talking to cabinet secretary level, board CEOs, et cetera, is maybe they won't understand cyber specifically, but they will understand risk and they will understand resource allocation. And so our job as IT professionals and network security guys is to calibrate our discussions in terms of how does it fit the overall risk profile of an organization, and how does it help or forestall other other risk-based activities, and how do you allocate the resources appropriately? And making an argument that maybe a stronger investment on the front end in cybersecurity will save you time and resources down the line.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that goes against the typical observed human behavior that sometimes people don't want to do anything till there's a crisis, and then they use the crisis and they suffer the pain, and the people suffer the pain, and then they can do something. You're talking about seeing if you can encourage government people to be a little bit proactive and look into the future in ways that could help them. That is always a great challenge, but sometimes it works. It sometimes works, especially.
The additional piece I would say to that, and it'll be less than a minute, I promise, is to look for places where you can scale. So Palo Alto Networks is a member of something called the Cyber Threat Alliance. It's about 24 of the largest cybersecurity companies around the world that are committed to sharing indicators among themselves. So we don't trade off of cyber indicators as intellectual property. We trade off what can you do exactly with them and how can you protect yourself better. So when you use Palo Alto Networks, you're also utilizing the 20 other so companies protecting almost the vast majority of the world's traffic. So those are the types of resource scale type decisions that you can work with your executive team on.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks a lot, and thanks for the secondary follow-up part too. Over to you, Michael Milray, and my question for you in the lightning round, the beyond lightning round, is, and this is good because this there is a chat question along the lines here too. Can you describe the supplier, since you're in GE? Can you describe the supplier's role in knocking out vulnerabilities and or letting end users be aware of them so they can better protect what they depend on? What's the supplier's role in this ecosystem, in some ways separate and independent from the people that supply security services or products? Good luck.
Great, thank you, Andy. I think one of the reoccurring themes here is that all modern organizations are energy organizations. All modern organizations are cyber organizations. And at that cyber energy nexus, as we've digitized and networked our entire energy infrastructure, getting this right is absolutely essential. So we work hand in hand with government, really with DARPA and DOE to accelerate game-changing R&D. And then we work very closely with our customers to really highlight and ensure that we have a defense in depth approach to how we develop, deploy, and manage our energy delivery systems globally. And quickly, just to conclude the last 20 seconds, we saw that with the executive order, the recent executive order for the bulk power system, suggesting that adversaries targeting power grid critical energy delivery systems. Customers were worried that this was going to lead to a rip and replace requirement for these prohibitively expensive assets. Working with government and energy utility partners, we worked to find ways in how we could monitor those critical systems, how we could work to ensure the trustworthiness of the supply chain through its entire chain of custody. So those are some of the examples where we really help to solidify that public-private partnership that is absolutely imperative to getting this right.
And again, depending on what country you're in and the way the public and the private interact with each other, your results may vary, as we say. Think about this. Right. Yeah. Think about this challenge, audience participants on this panel. I've asked everybody to speak slowly because not everybody on the other end has English as a first language, and yet we tee up these questions and say, "You've got a minute, go." How do you speak slowly, or at least slower than normal, and still fit in anything during a minute? These are future research topics for another day. The next question goes to Otis Alexander. And Otis, you definitely spoke about attackers. In fact, attack is the name of your thing. Tell us, if you would, with some brevity, the value. Why, especially people who are relatively new in the game, why not just think like a defender? Why think like an attacker and understand the attacker?
Yeah, I think it really helps you to focus. So it switches the focus from where all the actions an attacker can do to, or accomplish on your system, to what they have accomplished in the wild. And I think that helps to kind of focus some discussions, focus where you're putting defenses and things like that, which could save money, especially when you're a smaller utility and you don't have a lot of resources. It gives you somewhere to start. From the perspective of red teaming or thinking more adversarially, it gets you to think about the choices that the adversary has to make, what targets they would go after to create the most impact, or an impact that they traditionally create. And it makes you think about those choices and how you could kind of disrupt those activities. And like I said before, it's really attack is the foundation for threat-informed defense, and that's a systematic application of a deep understanding of adversary tradecraft, and that benefits you in multiple ways: the prevention, detection, and response to cyber attacks.
It sounds like a classic, in some ways, war fighting strategy. I think from people like Sun Tzu, right? You have to know yourself, but you have to know your enemy as well, or you'll be at a disadvantage. And I think attack gives you a good start to that process. Tim, now with time growing short, I got two questions for you here that are they're just not realistic, Tim. They're not. It's not going to help. Right. It's not going to be good for you or the audience to cram these things in. So I'm just going to ask you the more basic question again to help move people from wherever they are, especially if they're relatively novices to this software-defined networking thing. In the minute, can you talk about what exists before software? What problem does software-defined network and the security parts it brings, what problem does that solve from contemporary ways of networking?
Well, the first, I'll do that in two parts. The first part
Okay.
is we've usually traditionally put everything in the security perimeter. So we had a firewall that prevented bad things from coming in and tried to control things going out. But we had the soft GUI center. Once you got past that eggshell, you could maneuver. If you could figure out a way to get past the firewall and into that network, you had the ability to pivot or enumerate between devices and figure out how to really substantiate your attack. SDN, you can look at it as that stateless firewall on the local area network to control communication between devices. But more specifically, as we move more to detection and monitoring and continuous monitoring solution, it's the integration. So if you began out on an unmanaged switch, the solutions like CrowdStrike or Dragos or any of the other really good intrusion detection systems in the ICS environment, they do not have the capability to have that PCAP data to be streamed to them either from a span port or from a mirror of them. And traditionally, it could be a lot of traffic. With SDN, I can tune that and tune it to specific flows that I want to concentrate more on, or if I only have this much processing power, I focus it on my human to machine flows, but maybe I only do the machine to machine and I store those packets for 2 weeks, where the human to machine flow, maybe I store them for a year. So definitely good tactics that you can do with it.
All right, folks, that's ends the high tension, high wire balancing act of trying to say things in a super short amount of time. Now it's going to be a little more free flow, and I won't target the questions to you. By the way, we're about 8 minutes before the top of the hour. We're going to try to wrap up around the top of the hour. May go a little bit long for those audience members and panelists that can stay a minute or 2 or 3 past. But now I'm going to ask more open-ended questions, and let's see how this works in a Zoom format. Some of them I've put in front of you. Some of them align with questions that we have coming in on the chat from the audience too. And again, thank you, audience, for this hour out of your life, if I don't say it at the end, during a pandemic and just a crazy year. It's really excellent to find you trying to invest in yourself on behalf of yourself and your company or whoever it is you're trying to protect. Okay. The first one is for those in the utilities that have very low budgets, very low staff, don't have the resources that the big folks do. What beyond MITRE ATT&CK, which we know does not have any initial cost to it or any cost to it, what other free or open source tools are available that you think can provide value? And just give me a couple of them if you would, and say what they do basically.
Sure. One of the free offerings that CrowdStrike has is a website called Hybrid Analysis, and I'll put the URL into the chat. But Hybrid Analysis allows anyone to upload a file and see it run in a sandbox to determine what the file would have done to their computer. So that's very useful for
No kidding. Say it again. What was the name of it again?
Hybrid Analysis.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Drew. Other ones, guys?
I got a good one, Andy. It's communication. I find that the IT and the OT folks at energy utilities, they don't talk to the business people, the legal people. They don't talk to the control system engineers. Communication is free. We need to break down some of these stovepipes and barriers and talk to each other. One of the top reasons why adversaries are able to exploit some of these vulnerabilities, we're running flat networks, we're running services and open ports that don't need to be open. It's because the IT and OT folks never talk to each other, and they never are, and because of that, they can't talk to the business people to allocate the resources they need to buy down the risk. Communication, it's free.
It's free. It can be painful, but it is free, and it is certainly necessary. That's inside the organization, and yeah, I can speak from so many experiences where the different the idiom is stovepipes, right? The different parts of the organization don't talk to each other. Sometimes they're enemies with each other, it seems, and that's super unhelpful. So if you are a good communicator or know someone who is, see if you can break down some of those barriers. In the chat box, this is a different type of regional or sector-specific communication in the form of an ISAC. And thanks, Danielle, for the suggestion. ISAC is ISAC, and it stands for Information Sharing and Analysis Center. We have a bunch of them popping up and that have existed in the United States for different sectors and different regions. And they coordinate, generally speaking, they're all a little different between the government and the commercial sector. And they try to maximize the flow of vulnerability information, threat information, mitigation information across a sector. I think I just saw one yesterday, a note from the EEISAC, which was European origin, European energy, I think. And they're not just in Europe and the United States. And if there's not one in your region or your country, start one, model after these things, and you could soon be have a very important hub of communication in your country or in your region for the energy sector. Okay. Anyone else have a quick additional free or open source one? Because before I go to the next question. Okay, I'll take that. That's light pause.
Michael.
Go ahead.
Oops. Completely concur with Michael. One of the things that SEL does is we do a free 1 to 2 day seminar, cyber security seminar, really doing it from security, not just cybersecurity. And that we get all the C-suites, the engineers, the IT and the OT side, usually in the room for 1 to 2 days, and talk to them to break down those typical walls, form a lexicon that they can all understand, and really help both sides understand each other, which is tremendously important.
And that's free, no string, idiom again, idiom alert, no strings attached. You would do that for people?
We've done it for USAID and USDA a couple of times, and around the world, we've held those.
All right, fair enough. And just, I won't be able to recall them all, but I've taken training, and some of these folks have too, with the SANS, Global Cybersecurity Training Institute, SANS. They can be very expensive. They're very good. But in one of their classes, ICS 410, Industrial Control System 410, they introduced us to, I think, half a dozen or a dozen different completely free and open source tools that are of vital importance to cybersecurity defenders in OT environments. So there'll be ways of listing these tools to you in a way we won't be able to get to now. Another topic that I think is unavoidable, and everyone is feeling it, but not everyone understands what it means or what to do about it. A couple people refer to it as cloud. Cloud is a way to do things that you don't have the skills or the resources to do. A lot of the utilities in the United States, the smaller ones, are just quickly moving their data and a lot of their applications to cloud providers. And they assume that the cloud providers have an incentive for keeping everything secure. Otherwise, you won't trust them and you'll use another cloud provider. But still, it's such a high degree of dependency. And how do you do security with people you can't see and can't talk to? How does that work? So, panelists, what should the diverse group out there on the line here be thinking about first steps or second steps in terms of cloud security as they consider moving there, or if they've already done it?
Yeah, I would just say that even a cloud container can be an endpoint in a sense, because it can be obviously targeted by adversaries and used to move laterally, even if the data being stored in whichever cloud container is not what they're initially after. And so that's something that at CrowdStrike, we address that problem with our customers as well, by providing them with a means to secure their cloud offering too. But the other thing I would just note about cloud is it's really important to leverage the cloud where the cloud is going to be helpful for solving whatever problem that a utility is looking at, and not to resist the cloud for cloud's sake and be fearful of it. But similarly, obviously, no need to adopt new technologies where the only thing novel about it is that it's new. But by putting processing in the cloud and reducing resources on local processing, that's actually how CrowdStrike's able to deliver its offering, the Falcon platform. And I know that in other applications too, that's really where it's important to leverage the cloud. And from a security standpoint, when you're leveraging the cloud, you can also crowdsource indicators of attack and really determine if an attack against one customer is actually the same method that could be used against another. And
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those trends like, is there going to be more or less solar power next year? There's going to be more, and no one would question that. Are there going to be more people on the cloud next year? There's going to be more. There's just no, unless the world ends in the giant meteor strike, even with a pandemic, there's going to be more people in the cloud. Maybe there's going to be more because of the pandemic. I think that's proving to be the case as well. We have a question in. I want to give credit to this question because it came in even before we started. And I won't identify the country of origin, just in case that's a problem. But it's related to the communication issue that folks are chiming in on, our panelists as well. And it says, how do you get these concepts across to generals? Okay, generals being an example of a type of a government person that doesn't know anything about cybersecurity typically. Hopefully over time, some of our generals and senior and politicians and board members and companies, hopefully over time, some of these guys will have played video games when they were younger, and they'll have used the internet in productive ways, and some of them will have more of a clue than the old guard now. It's a generational thing, and nature will take its course is one way of saying it. That could be a little harsh. But given that you're going to we are dealing with people who don't have the right background, I think metaphor can be useful. Talk to them, use their words to the extent you can and still sound credible, like do some background on them. These are risks every bit as real, even though you can't see them exactly, as kinetic effects from tanks and artillery and things like that. You've got to try to meet them halfway on their ground with the language that you use, and use examples too, because now we do have great examples from Ukraine and the Middle East. And by the way, those examples, you can imagine a general saying, oh, they only put the power out for a couple hours. We could handle that. That happens every day here anyway, depending on what country you live in or what part of the United States. But it's important to think of those things in Ukraine, for example, as demonstrations, not as an attempt to seriously cripple a country, but to show other people, give them a taste. In Spain, it would be a tapas-sized taste, or up north in the Basque region, a pincho, a taste of what could happen to you if somebody really wanted to cause damage. And if you are in the energy space, you're critical infrastructure. And I know I haven't talked about my place much. I'll just say one motto at the Idaho National Lab that my smart colleagues say is, if you're critical infrastructure, you will be targeted. And if you're targeted, you will be compromised. Even if you have the best defenses, if certain people are after you, it's going to be very difficult to be 100% confident that you're keeping them out from your networks and systems. So that's back to Otis a little bit with the adversary mindset and planning for dark days or hard days ahead using some of the tools and techniques that have been described in the panel so far. Panelists, it's 4 minutes past the hour, unless you're in one of those time zones that has that half-hour offset, like my friend in New Delhi. Any last words you want to, any non-marketing last words you'd like to blurt out to the long-suffering attendees of this panel? Okay, there's that pause. I thank all of the panelists from the bottom of my heart, and to USAID and USEA. And this is Andy now trying to sign off as the moderator and pass it back to you guys to close this thing down. Thanks again, everybody. Be safe out there, wherever you are. Someone else is going to start talking, you'll see.
Thank you, Andy. I think we'll pass the baton on to Sheila for some closing words.
Yes, thanks so much, Andy, and the panel for one of the most truly brilliant and rewarding panels I've attended on any subject for a long time. I'd also like to mention that as a reforming lawyer, that if you don't include the lawyers and be inclusive going in, you'll have plenty of chances to talk to them later after an incident occurs. So the more inclusive you can be to get a team put together and to understand the significance of the issues and the interplay between life and death as a result of if there was an incursion like there was in the Ukraine, and you need only watch that video, what transpired on the screens in the Ukraine, to get religion in an instant. So I thank Andy, and I thank this unbelievably great panel, and I wish we could go on for another 2 days because every word you said is a gem. And thank you, and God bless each of you. And we'll see you at the next one.